This Florida Derby day, remember to sign up with DRF Bets.
Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona, and this is the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. Things are getting pretty serious on the Kentucky Derby trail this week. We've got 3 100 Kentucky Derby qualifying point preps on the line. I'm going to take a look at the Grade 1 Florida Derby at Gulfstream Park in this video, though. There's also the Jeff Ruby Stakes and the UAE Derby taking place this weekend. But this Florida prep is the culmination of a few preps that have taken place, the Holy Bull and the Fountain of Youth down at Gulfstream Park. There's a Grade 1 event going 1 1/8 for the 3-year-olds, and it features a prohibitive favorite in Greatest Honor. Let's throw up the field for this race, and you see that Greatest Honor, the number 7, is the 6-5 choice on the morning line. This is one of the top contenders for the Kentucky Derby in many people's estimations, although he hasn't run that fast yet, and we'll get to that in a little bit. He's really taken that Florida 3-year-old division by storm and has been a dominant winner of his last couple of races. But he's facing a pretty intriguing field here. The classy Spielberg coming in from the West Coast, as well as some up-and-coming horses that have won maiden and allowance races like Collaborate, Known Agenda, and Soup and Sandwich that are all stepping up in class to challenge him. So definitely some intriguing newcomers for Greatest Honor to face in this race, but he is clearly the horse to beat. Moving on to the TimeformUS pace projector before we get into those main contenders, a pretty unusual situation, at least for a Kentucky Derby prep with a field this large, in that you see that blue bar up at the top of the pace projector indicating this is the race where the pace projector is predicting a situation favoring horses on or near the lead. Typically, we see a lot more speed signed on for these Derby preps with horses stretching out in distance to try a 1 1/8 for the first time, but that's not the case here. While horses are stretching out, many of them are closers or horses that have more plodding type running styles. So we could see that number 9 Collaborate sneak away on the front end. One note that I do have about this pace projector, though, is that you might see the number 8, Soup and Sandwich, who's predicted to be back in mid-pack here, a little bit closer to the pace than it's indicated on this pace projector. He's coming out of a race that featured a very slow pace, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit, but I could see him being closer to Collaborate in the early going. One of those two will probably be on the front end here. The others just are not really speed types. I mean, you see horses like the number 1 Nova Rags and the number 10 Spielberg in behind that pace setter. They're really more mid-pack type runners, so I don't think we're going to see that quick of a pace in this Florida Derby, and potentially that'll work against the number 7 Greatest Honor. Speaking of Greatest Honor, let's take a look at his past performances as he comes into this first Grade 1 test of his career. He's been perfect in his last 3 starts. 3 victories, all of them at Gulfstream, all at that 1.16 distance. Now he's going to stretch out to the 1.1/8, and you would think that's going to help him getting that full stretch to work with, because as you see in this last race where he won the Fountain of Youth, as we take a look at the replay of that race, he just had that short stretch to make up about 4 lengths on the leader, drain the clock that day. Greatest Honor had experienced a little bit of traffic around the far turn, a little sluggish, not really wanting to run inside of horses. But once Jose Ortiz steered him out into the forward path about the quarter pole of this race, he just motored by the field. And you see he wins basically gear down at the end of this race, is much the best. The problem with Greatest Honor, though, is that he hasn't run that fast yet compared to some other Derby preps out there. Just a 1:13 for those last 2 victories in both the Holy Bull and the Fountain of Youth. And the Florida group of 3-year-olds this year just has not been that strong, not nearly as strong as we've seen in some past years. Most of the horses that ran against him in the Holy Bull and Fountain of Youth are not even in this race because they haven't really done enough to advance to this Grade 1 event. So Greatest Honor is stepping up to face arguably the toughest field of his career now in this 7th start of his career as he looks for his 4th in a row. And furthermore, he's got to deal with that potentially unfavorable pace scenario. I'm a fan of Greatest Honor. I think he's a horse that makes a lot of sense moving forward towards the Kentucky Derby. But if there's going to be a time to take a shot against him at a short price, this Florida Derby could be it, because I think there are some viable alternatives, and he might not get the trip that he really needs. The main challenger from a class standpoint is the number 10 Spielberg, who's coming in from the West Coast for Bob Baffert. And he's coming off the best performance of his career last time out in the slop at Oaklawn Park in the Southwest. He shipped from the West Coast that day to Oaklawn and seemed to enjoy the little bit of a vacation that he got. So we'll see if the same thing is true when he ships into Florida, something that Bob Baffert rarely does, having never started a horse in the Florida Derby before. Let's take a look at that last runner-up finish in the Southwest, the replay of that race as he's second to Essential Quality. Essential Quality is probably the leader of this division right now, the only one that might be ranked above Greatest Honor on most Derby lists. And Spielberg gives him a brief challenge coming to the 8th pole here, but Essential Quality is able to kick away in the final 1/8 mile of this race. And Spielberg just basically has to settle for second in the slop. He gets a pretty respectable 1:13 TimeformUS speed figure for this runner-up performance that's equal to the victory theory, the numbers that Greatest Honor has gotten in victory in his last couple of starts. So Spielberg, from just a speed figure standpoint, might be able to give Greatest Honor a scare here. He also has a bit more tactical speed than Greatest Honor does, though he hasn't really been using it in his last couple of starts. That might have been due to the fact that he didn't break that sharply last time in the Southwest, and he was a bit farther off the pace than I think Bob Baffert would have preferred. Because prior to that, Spielberg had showed more tactical speed, and especially as a 2-year-old, where he was close to the pace in some sprint races. So I think Spielberg could be a little closer to the pace here. I'm just not sure if Spielberg has the necessary upside to take another step forward. And I'm not sure that he's the alternative that I really want to use against Greatest Honor, but he's definitely a horse that can get a piece of this race, and I would advocate using him underneath. The horse that I think could wind up the second choice in this race, even though he's the fourth choice at 6-1 in the morning line, is the number 9, Collaborate. This is a horse that turned a lot of heads in his maiden victory last time out at Gulfstream Park, only going the 1-turn mile distance, but he really looked good doing it, like a horse that should appreciate every bit of added ground that he can get. Let's take a look at the stretch run of that race as he's opening up on the field as they come past the quarter pole, and definitely a visually impressive performance. The problem with Collaborate is that there's really not a whole lot behind him in this race. I suppose the runner-up could be okay, a horse for the Chad Brown stable, but aside from that, the other horses in this race with prior experience really hadn't distinguished themselves, and I keep harping on it. A lot of the 3-year-old races that we're seeing in Florida this winter are just not that strong, not as strong as you're accustomed to seeing these maiden and stakes races down at Gulfstream in the winter, and he only got a 102 TimeformUS speed figure for that performance. Part of that's due to the fact that the number was knocked down a little bit because he was setting a pretty moderate to slow pace on the front end, but Collaborate could get to set a pretty comfortable pace in this Florida Derby as well if they decide to use his speed again. So I wouldn't hold the fact that he set a slow pace last time against him too much, and he certainly looks like a horse that shouldn't have any trouble handling the 1 1/8. We've seen Into Mischief be able to sire horses going 2 turns on the dirt in top races across the country, and his dam is a winner of the Grade 2 Fairgrounds Oaks going 1 1/16 when she was a 3-year-old. So there is real dirt route pedigree to get 2 turns for Collaborate. Just kind of feels like he's turning into a bit of a wise guy horse in this Florida Derby as the obvious alternative to Greatest Honor. And if he is the second choice, like I think he will be, I want to look for a bit more value in an alternative for my liking. And the alternative that I'm most interested in is the number 5, Known Agenda. And Known Agenda actually has the distinction of being the last horse to defeat Greatest Honor. That was all the way back at Aqueduct in November of his 2-year-old season. Now, Known Agenda has not had the smoothest journey along to this Florida Derby since then. Not certainly the win parade that Greatest Honor has had. He lost as the favorite in the Remsen after that. Following that, he had a very disappointing performance again as the favorite in the Sam F. Davis, though Known Agenda finally got back on track last time out in an allowance race at Gulfstream Park. Let's take a look at the stretch run of that race. There was a bit of an incident coming off the top of the turn as Irad Ortiz steered Known Agenda down towards the inside and cut off a rival. Doesn't really matter with regard to the margin of victory here because that horse was going nowhere anyway. And Known Agenda is just loving the 1 1/8 distance, which he had won at before. He actually beat Greatest Honor going 1 1/8 when he broke his maiden. But you see, he's geared down at the end of this race, had it wrapped up long before they get to the wire. Now, this race got a 1:08 TimeformUS speed figure, which is a little bit off that 1:13 that Greatest Honor got for his last couple of stakes victories. But some horses out of that last race suggest that maybe that number could be a little bit higher than the 1:08 that it got. And given that Known Agenda was so geared down at the end of that race, I think he could have run a little bit faster. Also, he just strikes me as a horse that's hitting his best stride, wasn't really a finished product as a 2-year-old. He's a son of Curlin with a really strong stamina-laden European dam side family, and I think every bit of added ground this horse can get down the line is going to be to his benefit. He's going 1 1/8 again in this Florida Derby, and I think he's going to love that distance as he did last time. And he's also going to get probably a better trip than Greatest Honor because I think he's got a bit more tactical speed than that rival, and I think with the blinkers applied as they were last time, Irad Ortiz will have him a little bit closer to the pace here. So I'm hoping he gets the jump on Greatest Honor and can use that ample stamina of his to hold off the favorite in the stretch of this Florida Derby. 2 other horses that you might consider that are stepping up in class are the number 8, Soup and Sandwich being one of them. He is undefeated coming into this race for Mark Casse, but he has a big class question to answer here because he's never faced anything like this level of competition in his 2 starts to date. looked fine winning his maiden sprinting in his debut, and he got a pretty easy two-turn test last time at Tampa Bay Downs. Let's take a look at the stretch run of that race. He was last in the 3-horse field in the early going, moved up along the inside around the far turn to take this race over at the top of the stretch, and he's going to win fairly easily, but I don't like this greenness that he's showing in the stretch here. You see he's hanging on his wrong lead, gets a left-handed reminder there, but he's turning his head to the right, looking at the stands, and then switches over to his left lead briefly again, then right again there at the wire. Just the kind of unprofessionalism that I don't really want to see in a horse that's just making his third career start, stepping up to a grade 1 for the first time. So I think Soup and Sandwich does have some talent, and I believe he'll be closer to the pace than he was shown in the pace projector, because you see those blue color-coded TimeformUS pace figures for that last race. That's really dragging down his early pace rating of 71 from what it would be given a more fairly run race if he was coming out of one. But I do think he'll be closer to the pace. I just question whether he's really ready for this class test in the Florida Derby. And the one other horse that you might want to take a look at is the number 1 Nova Rags, who was second to the Sam F. Davis at Tampa Bay Downs last time. We'll take a look at that race from early February. He runs fine to be second to his stablemate Candyman Rocket here, but if I thought the horses competing at Gulfstream in the 3-year-old ranks were a little bit weak this winter, well, it's even more so at Tampa Bay Downs. This Sam F. Davis did not look that strong going into it. At once known Agenda, the favorite there, basically didn't show up at all. It became a much weaker race. And we saw these horses came back and performed next time out in the Tampa Bay Derby. The third place finisher was second in that race, but the winner came back. It was nowhere. Just not really sure about the overall quality of that Sam F. Davis. And Nova Rags is going to have to run a lot faster than the 101 he got last time if he wants to compete against this grade 1 Florida Derby field. So I respect the favorite Greatest Honor, but as you can see, if we put up my top picks, I'm going to go with the number 5, Known Agenda. He's 5-1 in the morning line. I'm hoping for a price at least around that. He could even drift up a little bit if Collaborate gets bet as much as I think he will. But I think Known Agenda is the right alternative to Greatest Honor, who I respect in this race. I just think from a value standpoint, now might be the right time to take a shot against him. And I'll use Collaborate underneath as well as Spielberg, but I think Known Agenda is the horse that is the right one to take as the alternative to Greatest Honor in the Grade 1 Florida Derby on Saturday at Gulfstream Park.